Hi, my friends. So today we have an intense topic. We have an intense conversation that we're going to have. And this is something vital to understanding our own liberation. When I started understanding this, it opened up so much for me. A lot of it was very challenging. And so I've shared this so often in group courses and one-on-one work with my clients or in sessions, but doing this on a broad scale, like on YouTube, is pretty intimidating because it's an intense conversation. This is something that will trigger a lot of people. But I want to say, if you're triggered by it, look at this. And I do think that a lot of people watching this as well are going to feel really liberated, really feeling understanding of themselves and why they haven't resonated with certain things. That's how I felt when I first heard this information. So I want to caveat a few things before we start. This is a conversation that is likely to bring a lot up within you internally and energetically. So I don't want you to focus necessarily so much on the particular words that I'm saying. Listen behind the words. Listen to the energy that's being conveyed. Okay, so I'm in the Akashic Records right now. I've already done all of my prayer work before this, protecting myself, calling in the Ascended Masters, calling in Yeshua, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene. Their presence is here. So instead of really hyper-focusing on the words that I say, because I'm human and I might mess certain things up or get certain dates wrong, I want you to focus on the energy that's behind this, because that's what is going to create freedom within yourself. Not hyper-focusing on, she got the date wrong, or she got this wrong, or who does she think she is, or whatever your ego might be saying to you. Okay? So the other thing that I want to say here, my intention with this video is purely to create liberation within some part of yourself. I don't care if you like this video or not. I want it to free you in some element. For some of you, that's going to mean it triggers the fuck out of you. For others of you, it's like I said, you're going to have this resonant feeling. So yeah, I'm not demonizing anything here. I want to share the storyline behind a big part of the patriarchal society that we live in that's created so much trauma within us, within every human on the planet today. I'm sharing the background, the building blocks that have created something really detrimental that we need to break free from. So I'm not demonizing Christianity. It might seem like that with the title of this video and what we're going to be talking about, but I prayed to my actual intention before I got on camera here. Please help me share this information without judgment. Please help me share this information from a space of love, compassion, and forgiveness. I'm not demonizing anyone or anything. We're all operating out of our, own learning lessons at the times that we create certain karmas, at the times that we do certain things. So we're all in our own evolutionary process, and we can't judge anything or anyone because there's a natural order to everything. There's divine law and divine order to everything. So if you're a Christian watching this and you feel attacked or feel demonized, please know that that's not my intention. I'm not directing that towards you. This has actually nothing to do with Christians in general. We can't ever categorize one group of people as being a certain way. I know Christians who are the most loving people that I've ever encountered, and I also know Christians who are the most hateful beings that I've ever encountered. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're a Christian. That's just how they're operating as their person, right? So this has nothing to do with Christianity itself. It has to do with the formation of something that has created a lot of detriment in the world, and really is just an archetype of something much bigger. So me sharing this in this particular fashion, my other intention is that this will open up your sight, open up your third eye, open up your eyes to seeing how this is actually playing out in many, many levels of our world today. So it's about this specific thing, but it's also much bigger. So I'm going to ask you, please engage with this. Please let me know what resonates, what triggers you. If you have additional information that you want to share, please put that in the comments. Like, seriously, I really want to hear your perspectives, hear if this resonates with you or if it triggers you. I am totally respectful of whatever you believe and whatever comes up for you during this. This felt like a soul calling for me to share. And it's taken me a while to create this video because I was afraid. So here we go. All right, let's take a breath. Okay, take one more, please. I want you to take a deep breath too. Take your biggest breath that you've taken today. Just allowing more space to fill your body. Releasing anything you're holding on to, tension, anxiety, tightness, whatever it might be, emptying yourself. And like I said, please listen to the energy behind this. Please feel the energy behind this, because everything is energy, first of all. And when we hyper focus on words, sometimes we can get distracted from what's actually trying to come through. So like I said, I've already called upon many ascended masters to be here to mostly to help me, but also to send energy to you as well. So let's start at the beginning. So the church has been created to control us. The bold statement. We're going to take things back historically, okay? So first of all, the history as we've been taught it is not accurate. Just like the history of, the holiday of Thanksgiving is not accurate. There's been a lot of censorship. There's been a lot of switching stories up to serve a particular party, to serve a particular mission. So we have to kind of clear the slate of what we actually know to be true. And our souls remember this. So this is why I'm saying don't focus on the words, focus on the energy behind this, because that's really going to be what resonates and what you feel internally in your soul as remembrance. So at the time that the church was created, this was, around 2100 years ago. Before that, though, there was a great shift from honoring the feminine to the removal of the feminine. So that was happening before the Christian church was created. So when we look at time periods, I talk a lot about the ages of astrological time. I have a whole seminar on my website that you can go to and watch if you'd like. It's really fascinating. But we have all of these astrological ages of time. So we've already been through a golden age in our planet Earth. We've been in what's called the Kali Yuga since the desecration of the golden age. This has sent us collectively into a period of darkness, basically descending into our ego, into matter, and away from spirit, all so that we can come back into the cycle of remembering who we are, coming back into the age of light. So the last 2,000 years, the age of Pisces, but this really began with the age of Aries, which was about 4,000 years ago. That was the time of Moses. So the age of Aries descended us into this period of darkness. The age of Pisces is the darkest age we've known on planet Earth. So the age of Pisces began around the time of Yeshua's murder. And that's the way that I'm going to phrase it, because that's what it was. We'll talk about that later on in this video. The last 2,000 years have been the darkest age that we've known, definitely since the last golden age. And now we are reemerging from the year 2012 into the age of light. We are reawakening into the next cycle of the golden age, which won't be for a long time. We're not going into the golden age right now. We are preparing, we're coming back into the light so that the next stage will be the golden age. So, what does all of that mean? What's important for us to know is that we're emerging from an age of darkness. So we've literally completely forgotten who we are. That's what I want to talk about in this video. Some of those things that have impacted us and taken away our power so that you can remember who you are on a deeper level. This is coming back into light. Now, darkness and light are both equally important. We've been taught that, darkness is bad or darkness is scary. We're just not used to it. And there needs to be a balance of both. We've been purely in the dark and we haven't had the light. So there's massive distortions. We're operating from massive distortions. And, we wonder why the world is the way that it is today, because we've been operating out of massive distortions. And there's been people in power, I believe at a level much larger than we can even see, that are pulling strings and operating things in a certain way to benefit from our lack of power. So what I want to focus on here, we're going to start with around the time of Yeshua's murder, Jesus's murder. So, like I was saying before, there was the removal of the divine feminine around 10,000 years ago. The goddess and the god were both worshipped, but primarily the goddess, the mother, the creation, was worshipped. And at a certain point in time, that started to shift. At the time of Jesus, that had already, remember I had said the age of Aries began with Moses. This was about 4,000 years ago. That last 2,000 years. So for about 2,000 years, technically it's like 2,200 years or something, but for that amount of time period, the divine feminine was being removed from her power, killed, exiled, tortured, raped, pillaged, temples burned, indigenous cultures wiped away. We've seen this cycle happening again and again, literally erasing those who work with the mother, who honor the divine feminine principles of life, taking them out. In many ways, so many of us have immense trauma from this, from other lifetimes, remembering certain things, but also even if you don't remember, it's cellular. We all hold those beliefs in ourselves. So you might even just want to sit with that for a minute. I'm like, okay, I need to take a second. That energy alone, the feminine being wiped away, is incredibly traumatic. A lot of times we'll talk about the witch wound. That's a way that the divine feminine was taken out recently, 200-300 years ago. Women who showed their oracular power, women who showed their healing power, were killed. So deep trauma lies in this. I'm not saying this to awaken the trauma in you. I'm saying it to allow you to remember so that you can fully see. Not with your two eyes, not with what you've been told, but with what you remember cellularly. So, around the time of Jesus, 2,000 years of removing the feminine, there were still priestess temples. There were still some people sort of underground honoring the feminine. So Jesus and his community were called Essenes, and they were a culture, or a community rather, that worshipped the goddess, that honored the mother principle, that honored the feminine. So something that I found so fascinating is that Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Jesus, all grew up in this community together. There's so much I could say about this. They grew up, they were devotees of the goddess, so it was like they were in a priestess temple. They grew up in temple. They were training to be in ascension their whole life. So it's not like they were just running around having a normal life and then, during that time. They were raised in a very particular way. They were raised in a very, very spiritually developed sort of way, if that makes sense. I'm not using all the right words. Give me feel the energy here. So Yeshua actually studied many different lineages. There's a lot of things that aren't true that have been depicted about him that are not true. He studied many different lineages. He went to Egypt and learned about the Egyptian mystery schools. He studied there for many, many years. He went to India, learned Tantra. He studied with the Druids. The miracles that he was performing were a result of him being able to work with energy and understanding the spiritual laws of the universe, becoming an ascended being. This could be like a year-long study, you guys. There's so much to talk about here. Please understand that what I'm sharing with you here is very basic. It goes much, much, much deeper. That's why I keep stopping, because I want to go into little areas And I can't because we don't have time in a YouTube video. And also, certain information can only be revealed when people are ready, not in a public setting like this. So, yeah. Okay, so the removal of the feminine. This is where I want to bring the church in. So the feminine had already been effectively being taken out for thousands of years. The patriarchy was in full effect. There was, authority systems and tyrannical systems and hierarchies in place. And the system at the time of Jesus was a patriarchal system. So those who did work with the feminine, work with the mother energies were underground. They weren't welcome to be doing that openly. So there are many different stories that are told or energies that are shared within the Bible itself or with those who teach the Bible, especially back in the day, that have changed a lot of the narratives. So, for example, what have we learned about Mary Magdalene? I have her picture right here because I work with her all the time. And this is really one of the keys. She's one of the keys to understanding what I'm here to talk about today. Mary Magdalene, we have been told that she was a prostitute. Mary Magdalene was Yeshua's equal, counterpart. Some people say they were twin flames. Some people say they were married. Regardless, she was his top apostle, top disciple. His right-hand woman, you could call it that, at minimum. She was labeled a whore and a prostitute to desecrate her being for thousands of years. She was called a whore and a prostitute and wasn't given the proper credit. Literally, that's if it's the exact same thing as if people said the same about Jesus. Ascended masters operating in human form, coming into their enlightenment in this lifetime, ascending into higher realms, teaching the energy of Christ consciousness to the communities around them, to the masses, and then being called a whore. To try to diminish the impact, to try to diminish what was actually happening. Now, at this time, you remember, the feminine was removed, but also women during this time period had no power. They were considered property. They had no respect whatsoever. A woman was basically the same as a cat, cattle, right? So to the church, showing Mary Magdalene as the equal of Yeshua was astonishing. There's no way that they could have done that because it would have completely removed the idea that women were property, that women were nothing, women weren't to be respected or listened to, women had no innate gifts or talents. We're just sort of there to procreate and that's it. That's the very first thing to look at. I believe the year was 2016. It's happened 2 different times. The Pope has relinquished that idea very quietly at the end of other speeches in really low-key ways. P.S. Mary Magdalene wasn't a prostitute. Walks off the stage. That just happened. Oh, P.S. Mary Magdalene was actually the apostle of the apostles, meaning she was an equal to Yeshua. So, the divine feminine is rising at this time, and this is why Mary Magdalene has been coming back into our awareness. She's been coming back in a very large way. Many people experience her. I've experienced her hundreds of times, working with her in other realms, having her come visit me. But I'm saying that because the divine feminine is rising, and that's created this pressure that the church actually had to admit certain things. So then if we look at that, okay, if the church just admitted that she actually was very important, what else has been hidden? Mary Magdalene had a whole gospel. It's been found in a few different locations throughout the world. The same pages are ripped out of this gospel. I think that it's been found in 3 or 4 different places, like in Egypt and Greece, and then maybe in Spain. I'm getting that wrong, I think, but there's been a few copies found. They all say the same thing, and they have the same exact pages ripped out. Now, sometime after Yeshua was murdered, we'll again go back to that in a minute when it comes up. Sometime after Yeshua was murdered, there was the Council of Nicaea. I think I'm saying that right. All of these different leaders came together and were deciding what gospels will be put into the Bible. Think about the power of that meeting itself, the power of those decisions to affect literally 2,000 years later. Every person on the planet knows who Jesus is. Maybe if you live in the rainforest or something and you're in a tribe and you don't have communication with the external world, but they probably are like channeling him and speaking, like seeing him and stuff. So, by the way, Yeshua is one avatar of Christ consciousness. There have been many avatars of this. Many avatars of this throughout the different ages. Typically, there's one avatar per age who embody Christ consciousness and are godlike because of that. So anyways, the Council of Nicaea. Think about the power that's going into what is going to be included in this religious text. And think about the consciousness of the people deciding that. Women are property. Women are not to be respected, seen as holding any value whatsoever. There are other gospels that were not included in the Bible that all celebrated feminine energy. Yeshua was trained under the goddess's wisdom, under the goddess's teachings. Tantra, alchemy, magic. So much of that lies within the feminine realm. So I feel like there's a switching gears happening. So by the way, when I say that, I'm being guided in certain ways of what to say, what not to say, and the order that we're going to be talking about certain things. I don't know what I'm saying here. I want to take that back. I know what I'm saying because I've been studying this, learning this, channeling this myself for years, but I didn't make notes for this video. So my guides in the Akashic Records are helping me. Okay. So switching gears a little bit, I want you to think about what the church has really taught us, especially when we go back in time, because now we're operating, churches have different, preachers might not be saying the same messages as they were 100 years ago, 200 years ago. There's a lot more like non-denominational churches and more new agey sort of preachers, ministers, all of those sorts of things. So I want you to think about maybe a couple hundred years ago, because remember, we are deeply embedded with this stuff, even if we are physically consuming different information now. Generations of our lineages have been eating, breathing, bathing in this energy, so it deeply affects us subconsciously, which is very dangerous because a lot of times we're not aware of these things. So what I'm trying to get at, the church basically shamed all of our desires, creating in this age of darkness, creating us to be people that believed we were innate sinners, that our desires were wrong, shaming us for our primal desires, sex, money. Think about what happens when we shame our primal desires. Those desires cannot go away. That's impossible. They are going to be filtered through something else. So if we repress if we repress sex or sexual desire, it's going to come out in a very unhealthy and dark way. If we accept and honor our sexual desire, then it can be expressed in a healthy way. You can't make up the Catholic Church and how that representation of repressed sexuality has shown up in the Catholic Church. Probably all of you know what I'm talking about without me saying it. So in my studies, what I've learned is that priests initially were told, I think that this was like a couple hundred years after Jesus, priests initially were told, okay, you cannot have sex until you're married. But then priests were told, you can't have sex at all, you have to be celibate. And there was actually like an uproar. Priests didn't want to do that. Priests didn't want to do that. They were married, many of them. So all of a sudden, it's a sin for them to be a child of God, a teacher of God, a steward of God, whatever you would call it, and enjoy their physical body. So then what happens? Over time, all of that repressed energy gets shared in a very demonic way, in a very dark way. The Catholic Church is probably one of the biggest organizations involved in molestation, sexual assault, rape, all of those sorts of things. I'm going to leave it there. Nothing more needs to be said about that. But there's also been many other desires within us that have been repressed. So let's just stick with sex because that's a big one. And it also impacts literally every area of our life. And it depicts what I want to talk about in this video very clearly. Sex was very clearly chosen to be something to be shamed because our sexual energy is our life force. If we are not honoring our sexual energy, here's the big thing. If we don't know how to cultivate our sexual energy, we are so much less powerful. The amount of power and creative force that you can cultivate through your sexual energy is enormous. This is something that in mystery schools, in the time of the goddess, that she was the one being worshipped, that she was the one being revered and honored, was well known, was taught, especially among those who were considered spiritually mature enough to handle it. Because even at that time, there were a lot of people who weren't mature enough to hold certain information. That's also why I'm saying in this video, I'm keeping it really basic, because I don't know who's watching this. A lot of information that can give someone power can be used literally like what I'm talking about in this video. You can use power in a positive way or in a negative way, and I'm using air quotes if you're just listening to this. So if we don't understand how to utilize our sexual power, also if we're deeply shameful of our sexual power, we have no power. Our vitality is gone. Our life force is minimized. How many people are still living from a space of purely security, purely like survival mode? It's not even necessarily related to money, just in general, like living to survive. We have so much more power. We have so much more power. Something else that the church created was this idea that God is external of us, God is outside of us. This is the original wound, the original core wound, that we were separated from God. We're not separate from God. God is within us. And one of the biggest damages that the church did was to create the idea that we need an intermediary to reach God. God is within you. The easiest reason that this happened is because the feminine energy was removed. Feminine energy is oracular. She sees. Everybody has feminine energy, by the way, whether you're a man or woman or whatever you identify as in your physical body. The feminine energy that lives within you is oracular, all-seeing, all-knowing. If that is taken away, if that is suppressed, if it's shamed, that's half of your life force that's taken from you. This is something that many of you guys watching this are healers, priestesses, seers, or just interested. You're having a spiritual awakening. You're ascending. And so you're probably having some of these gifts starting to come back online, or you're thinking about it. And this is one of the major ways that the church diminished our power as well. Not being able to trust our intuition. So anyways, I kind of got off track of what I was saying. What I was saying before was that, our original wound is that we're separated from God. And so if we feel that we're separate from God and we need an intermediary, we need the church in order to reach God, think about the amount of power that diminishes within us. We don't trust our own intuition in connecting to God, the source, to the universe. By the way, God is a very triggering word to many people because there has been so much trauma this lifetime in relation to your past lives related to God. So use whatever word, resonates with you. But here it seems very appropriate to just say God. So by separating you from God, by thinking that you can't reach that internally within yourself, you have no power. All of a sudden the church owns you, the church controls you. Also noticing the energy behind so much of what's shared from the church is that God is to be feared. He's going to judge you. You're a sinner. Weren't you also created in the eyes of God? Weren't you also created perfectly? It's like both of those things are said, so then why would God create a sinner? Please understand that God is all loving. He's not sitting there judging you. He celebrates what you do that's good and bad because you're learning. You're evolving as a soul. So the church is a metaphor also for all of the big things that we give our power to in life that create fear in us, that we're not enough, that we're doing something wrong, that we're bad, that we're shameful, that we're guilty. We're not any of those things. We are unconditionally loved. Would the church even exist if we all thought that we were unconditionally loved by God? I don't know. So what's important for you to sit with here is that we've been raised in a patriarchal society, not just since Jesus, from way before that. Oh, let's talk about Jesus's murder, because I kept mentioning that. So this is something to showcase the morality of the church and the morality of those who created this institution. So basically, Yeshua was out preaching Christ consciousness, unconditional love, forgiveness, that you can't do anything wrong in the eyes of God, that you are completely unconditionally loved. Also teaching that you cannot give your power to these false hierarchies to people who are pretending to be better than you or higher than you in any sort of position. The church didn't like that. If people started to bring that on, this is also, interestingly enough, this is also what's happening right now. We're starting to remember our sovereignty. The church didn't want that, and the patriarchal society in general didn't want that. If people believe that they are powerful and they don't need others to tell them what to do, they are not going to be able to be controlled. And no one can profit off of them in whatever way that profit might look like. It's sort of comparable to the pharmaceutical industry today. The pharmaceutical industry dies if people are cured, if people are not sick. They keep you in a loop of staying sick. So it's very much the same energy. When we remember that we are sovereign beings, as Christ taught, that makes us very, very powerful. And when humanity in general is in our power, we can't be swayed, we can't be bought, we can't be controlled. We know who we are and we stand in our truth. We stand in our truth. So Jesus was literally murdered because he was a threat to the patriarchal society. Then this same group put him on a pedestal and said, worship him. He absolved all of your sins. He died for your sins, creating the idea that we are innate sinners, that we aren't good, that we are shameful, that the most holy person of all time had to die because we were such sinners. Do you understand the programming? We still feel that 2,000 years later. That programming is so incredibly deep. Please just sit with that. Feel this energy in your body. What's coming up for you? What do you notice? What do you feel? So then Christ is put on this pedestal as someone to worship, except it's not even his original teachings that are being worshipped. What he taught was Christ consciousness. How do we embody the Christ? By the way, he is one of many Christs. The different avatars of the different ages. Holders of basically unconditional love. So you could look at really any ascended master as holding that same frequency. What Yeshua also did on an energetic level was open up the gates to, this is like really hard to put into words, to ascend into your light body, out of the physical body into your light body, and to exist in that space, the Ka body. This is a whole another video, never something I would share publicly on YouTube. So that's a whole different conversation. But what he was teaching was unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness, right? It said that he was forgiving the people who were murdering him as they were doing it. They don't know what they're doing. So there's a lot more that you could go into this. But I feel that what's really important to sit with just from this initial share is that the church is very much a metaphor in this case, and also a big part of the building blocks of what we're experiencing today, with fear, with trusting ourselves or trusting others to have power over us, believing that we don't have power ourselves. Why would we believe we don't have the power? Because subconsciously we believe that we are shameful, that we are guilty, that we are not good, that our desires are wrong. And when we're operating subconsciously from that space, everything is tainted. So how do we begin to replace that with the idea that we are unconditionally loved? We are whole and perfect in all that we are. We are God. Each of us is God. So in this age, as I spoke about many times, each astrological age has its own avatar. Krishna, Moses, Jesus, many before that, Rama. In this age, there's not going to be one avatar. We all are ascending into Christ consciousness. The second coming of Christ that's spoken about is when we all activate Christ consciousness within us, when we ascend to that level of being. That's going to take incredible awakening. Incredible initiations for us to remember our light and to fully embody our light. I talk about all the time. Each initiation we experience brings more light into the body. Our nervous system has to adjust to that light. Otherwise, our nerves would be fried and we would die. So we are slowly bringing this energy into our body. I don't have anything to offer you at the end of this. You can have an Akashic record reading, I guess. That's a beautiful way to connect with your ascended masters and what your particular areas of growth might be. So you can go to my website and book that if you'd like. AllieWilkins.com, I think, /Akashic Records. You'll see it if you just go to AllieWilkins.com. But ultimately, it's how do you start to embody unconditional love? How can you start to be in the energy of forgiveness, acceptance, compassion? How can you start to, for me, it helps so much to work with ascended masters, whether it's Yeshua or Mary Magdalene or Mother Mary or Kuan Yin or Lakshmi or Hathor or Isis, who I have back here, Goddess Isis. There are so many, Green Tara, who I have back here on the windowsill, Ganesh, Osiris. There are so many different ascended masters that can support you in this energy. And you've worked with many of them in other lifetimes. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on really fast that I forgot about, also this idea of like purity, the whole, in terms of women. Women have been seen as the whore or the mother, one or the other. Mother Mary was not this completely wholesome, pure energy. She was an ascended master. She was a goddess incarnated. However, she was also a human in that lifetime. And she wasn't this like perfect, squeaky clean image that we have of her. Just like Mary Magdalene was a powerful spiritual teacher, and she was not a prostitute. She did know about sex magic. She was a tantrika. But there was also an ownership of sex, an acceptance of sex, of their sexual being, of their sexual energy cultivated as life force that was very threatening to the church. So by putting these labels on either one, it creates this idea that women are either whores or holy. And if there's one, like, do you realize that back in the day, if you were raped as a woman, you were considered completely invaluable and of no use? You couldn't be married if you were raped. Like, what? This went on, I know this from watching Outlander. This went on through the 1800s. If you were raped, you were considered dirty and unmarriable. What? So there's a lot for us to sit with here. There's a lot for us to move through here. There's so much distortion. So much distortion. And the question is, how do we free ourselves of this? How do we start to see with our third eye where this is happening in other areas, where we are being affected by this the most, where we feel the most shame, where we feel guilt or unworthiness, or at the deepest root of it, where do we feel separation from God? God is within you. You don't need anyone to reach God. You don't need to book an Akashic record session with me. You can cultivate your own intuition to connect with your guides. I will say sometimes it's very helpful. Literally, I have an Akashic record reading later today with someone else, even though I'm in the records every day by myself. Sometimes it's nice to have another person look in on you because we all have blind spots. But if you're like, help me, I don't know what to do, book an Akashic record reading. This is a beautiful experience. Or ask yourself, how do I cultivate more compassion and love in my life? Not romantic love, unconditional love. That's a topic for another video, romantic love. Anyways, please let me know how you received this video, what came up for you, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. I really want to know. If you want me to make a video on some little thing that I touched on here, or maybe a course if it's not suitable for YouTube. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for holding acceptance as I shared imperfectly and maybe got dates or certain things wrong. But I want you to feel the energy of that. So thank you for doing that. And please like this, share this if it supported you. Engage with it though, please, so that other people can see it, because there's a lot embedded in here, even behind the words. So anyways, thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you later.